that fills my throat like a fist gloved in fur. A police van's bloody floor is not a table of jasper, no matter how earnestly one evokes a heap of old stories, and yet I cannot help myself. I think that if Zadur had to die, it should have been in a wooded grove, thrust down by a wild boar or a bolt of lightning. This is my folly and a stubborn weakness of mine. I am the first to acknowledge it. Who gives a damn these days for obsidian knives, sacrificial banquets, altars, fires? Who gives a damn for the bodies of boys? Who gives a damn, for that matter, for trees? A boy pulls away from the blade, and when it strikes, cries out. The many birds in the woods take flight and scatter, filling the sky with a victim's own voice. His blood is a fountain that cannot quench thirst, a fountain that never ceases to spill. Infection gnaws at the face of the day. The wells of the world fill with tears. My invalid's cup of chicory, a neutral thing children drink for breakfast, has grown cold and tastes of brine. To tell the truth, everything tastes of brine when it doesn't taste worse. I have a friend, a gentle and erudite pornographer, who only eats cake, so fearful is he of flesh. His abstinence is entire. He argues that even vegetables are fleshy. You have guessed that he shares my fondness for mythology. Of middle age, graying at the temples, he writes books you can find only at the railroad station, yet subsists on eclairs and so forth. And death? What does death eat? Everything, of course, with a decided preference for young men. Quick, angular, bubbling over with laughter, above all, dark. In life they smell of flowers, in death of brine or worse. The blood of boys spatters the continents like the seeds of pomegranates. And then I leap ahead. He's now arrived in Constantine, Algeria. I canceled 2 weeks of lectures and within days, exhausted by the redundancies of rail and ocean travel, found myself in Constantine, where I took a room in the city's grand, no more colonial hotel, its dour French facade barely enlivened by stereotyped balconies and arabesques, its roof punctuated by an undersized and uninspired minaret, its entrance guarded by 4 French soldiers, their departure overdue, soldiers down from the mountains forever, humiliated by their good fortune, bewildered but unscathed, boys named Martin, Leclerc, Charbonnier, Leblanc, boys whose officers had forsaken them, whose officers had misled them, whose officers had had their throats slit, boys who had been given orders to file false reports, who had been given orders to use electrodes on the enemy, who had seen their comrades' heads torn from their shoulders, who had stood by as their comrades raped darker boys before cutting off their ears, boys who had done these things themselves, boys who had been told that death would redeem them, that victory would absolve them, that war was progress, that war was destiny, that Algeria was France, and that God and Providence and reason were all on their side. Boys who believed or who did not believe in God's intentions, in good intentions, in pacification, in urgency. Boys who had made their way in fear along the mined frontier that divides myth and history. Boys whose fathers despised their sons' fragility, their adolescent reveries, their clairvoyance, their incertitudes, and who celebrated murder in the name of audacity. Thank you.
Thank you, Ricky. I just want to check something. Is Melanie Cruz here yet? She's not here. Okay. So we will move on now from Algeria, perhaps back here again. I want to invite Kizan Sam from GSIS to read a poem.
This is called The Lost America of Love to Allen Ginsberg by Hader Khan. Not past blue automobiles and driveways, not anywhere towards a home, never more to a silent cottage, never more. Any gray-bearded, lonely old courage teacher? America, do you see? A boat disappears on the black waters of Lethe. America, do you know who you are? America, do you hear the voices of your sons and daughters?
Thank you. We now want to move across the ocean again, this time to England, humor always helps. And you all know about Monty Python, right? Well, one of them who is still alive, wrote a very nice letter to the Observer. And we have an Englishman who is an actor here in Denver, and he has very kindly come here today to read that for us. I hope you'll enjoy it. It's serious, but it's also seriously funny. And I would now invite Robin Davies to come and read.
So, humour helps, so please laugh. At the appropriate times, obviously. So I'd like to read a letter by Terry Jones of Monty Python fame. Letter to the Observer, Sunday, January 26, 2003. Dear Sirs, I'm really excited by George Bush's latest reason for bombing Iraq. He's running out of patience. And so am I. For some time now, I've been really pissed off with Mr. Johnson, who lives a couple of doors down the street. Well, him and Mr. Patel, who runs the health food shop, they both give me queer looks. And I'm sure Mr. Johnson is planning something nasty for me. But so far, I haven't been able to discover that. I've been round his place a few times to see what he's up to, but he's got everything well hidden. That's how devious he is. As for Mr. Patel, don't ask me how I know. I know from very good sources that he is, in reality, a mass murderer. I have leafleted the whole street telling them that if we don't act first, he'll pick us off one by one. Some of my neighbours say, if I've got proof, why don't I go to the police? Well, that's just simply ridiculous. The police will say that they need evidence of a crime with which to charge my neighbours. They'll come up with endless red tape and quibbling about the rights and the wrongs of a preemptive strike. And all the while, Mr. Johnson will be finalising his plans to do terrible things to me. While Mr. Patel will be secretly knocking people off. Since I'm the only one in the street with a decent range of automatic firearms, I reckon it's up to me to keep the peace. But until recently, that's been a little difficult. Now, however, George W. Bush has made it clear that all I need to do is run out of patience. And then I can wade in and do whatever I want. And let's face it, Mr. Bush's carefully thought out policy towards Iraq is the only way to bring international peace and security. The one certain way to stop Muslim fundamentalist suicide bombers targeting the US or the UK is to bomb a few Muslim countries that have never threatened us at all. That's why I want to blow up Mr. Johnson's garage and kill his wife and children. Strike first, I'll teach him a lesson. Then he'll leave us in peace and stop peering at me in that totally unacceptable way. Mr. Bush makes it clear that all he needs to know before bombing Iraq is that Saddam is a really, really nasty man, and that he has weapons of mass destruction, even if no one can find them. I am certain I've just as much justification for killing Mr. Johnson's wife and children as Mr. Bush has for bombing Iraq. Mr. Bush's long-term aim is to make the world a safer place by eliminating rogue states and terrorism. It's such a clever long-term aim, because how can you ever know when you've achieved it? How will Mr. Bush know when he's wiped out all terrorists? When every single terrorist is dead? But then a terrorist is only a terrorist once he's committed an act of terror. What about would-be terrorists? They're the ones who these are the ones that we really want to eliminate, because most of the terrorists, being suicide bombers, have already eliminated themselves. Perhaps Mr. Bush needs to wipe out everyone who could possibly be a future terrorist. Maybe he can't be sure he's achieved his objective until every Muslim fundamental terrorist is dead. But then some moderate Muslims might convert to fundamentalism. Maybe the only really safe thing to do is for Mr. Bush to eliminate all Muslims. It's the same in Marsh Street. Mr. Johnson and Mr. Patel are just the tip of the iceberg. There are dozens of other people in the street who I don't like and who, quite frankly, look at me in odd ways. no one will be really safe until I've wiped them all out. My wife says I might be going a bit too far. But I tell her, using the same logic as the President of the United States of America, and that shuts her up. Like Mr. Bush, I've run out of patience. And if it's good enough a reason for the President, then it's good enough for me. I'm going to give the whole street 2 weeks. No, 10 days. To come out in the open and hand over all aliens, interplanetary hijackers, galactic outlaws, and interstellar terrorist masterminds. And if they don't hand them over nicely and say thank you, I'm going to bomb the entire bloody street to Kingdom Come. It's just as sane as what Mr. George W. Bush is proposing. And, in contrast, what he's intending, my policy will only destroy one street. Yours sincerely, Terry Jones.
Well, that was very funny and also very scary. So you got 2 for 1, fun and scary. I will next invite Rebecca Rowe, who has a poem on Baghdad and Washington.
Baghdad and Washington. Ancient sister grew up and old before I was born. Still your face is young. Thick, dark hair stashed away under worn silk, large piercing eyes, shadowed by anxiety, fear, exhaustion. Nimitz and its battleships approach, just as I come of age, brash young sister. Knowing existence only in years, months, days, not your many centuries. Maturity takes time, not lives. Soaking our hands in each other's blood augurs perpetual enmity, no vows of mutual fidelity, blood sisters. Both human and divine, you brought us fair, wise Gilgamesh. His quest is yours and mine. Let me sheath my saber, retrieve my troops, disarm for a heroic quest, to grow and understand you, older sister, break bread with you, trade hurling epithets for sweet samar, launch poetry and literary wars, rivaling all those who have gone before.
Thank you, and now a poem by a great dead poet, Wilfred Owen, and Jim Cole will be reading it.
Wilfred Owen is, or was, what is known as a war poet. He wrote during the World War I. This is a poem called Dulce et Decorum Est. Bent double, like old beggars under sacks, knock-kneed, coughing like hags, we cursed through the sludge, till on the haunting flares we turned our backs, and toward our distant rest began to trudge. Men marched asleep. Many had lost their boots but limped on, bloodshod. All went lame, all blind, drunk with fatigue, deaf even to the hoots of tired, outstripped 5-9s that dropped behind. Gas! Gas! Quick, boys! An ecstasy of fumbling, fitting the clumsy helmets just in time. But someone still was yelling out and stumbling and floundering like a man in fire or lime. Dim through the misty panes and thick green light, as under a green sea I saw him drowning. In all my dreams, before my helpless sight, he plunges at me, guttering, choking, drowning. If in some smothering dreams you two could pace behind the wagon that we flung him in and watch the white eyes writhing in his face, his hanging face, like a devil sick of sin. If you could hear at every jolt the blood come gargling from the froth-corrupted lips, obscene as cancer, bitter as the cut of vile, incurable sores on innocent tongues. My friend, you would not tell with such high zest to children ardent for some desperate glory the old lie, dulce et turcorum est pro patria more. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. I think it was another Englishman who said that patriotism was the last refuge of a scoundrel. And right. So now we want to hear another great poet, this time from Japan. Actually, I would describe Yosano Akiko as somebody who is or who could be the Japanese counterpart of our Riki Ducournau, the same love of life, the same understanding of beauty, the same deep feeling for humanity, for nature, for language, and love of life. First, we'll have the English translation read by Melanie Cruz, who I understand is here now. And then Shoko Azuma will read the Japanese version.
Please do not die. To my younger brother in the enemy-encircled Port Arthur, Yosano Akiko. Ah, younger brother, I cry for you. Please do not die. Because you are the youngest, our parents love you the most. But did our parents teach you to wield a sword and kill other people? To kill and die while bringing you up till you are now 24? You are from the famous merchant family in Sakai City. You will succeed your father. Please do not die. What does it matter if the Ryojen castle is destroyed or not? You will not know. It is far from the concerns of a merchant's family. Please do not die. The emperor is not going to the battle by himself, yet seems to tell people to spill one another's blood, to die like beasts, and seems to say dying is honorable, because the emperor has deep feelings. What could he be thinking? Ah, younger brother, in this battle, please do not die. Last autumn, our father passed away, but our mother still lives in deep sorrow, her child called to the front. Only she protects the house, although it is heard that the reign of our emperor is comfortable. Her hair is more gray than black. Your delicate and young wife cries, lying behind the curtain. Did you forget her, or do you think of her? You have not lived together for more than 10 months. Please think of a young woman's heart. You are the only one in the entire world. Who else can all of us rely on? Please do not die.
Now Shoko Azuma, who is a student here at GSIS, with the Japanese version.
ああ弟よ、君を泣く。君、死にたもうことなかれ。末に生まれし君なれば、親の情けは勝りしも。親は刃を握らせて、人を殺せと教えしや。人を殺して死ねよとて、24までを育てしや。堺の町の空き人の旧家を誇る主にて、親の名を継ぐ君なれば、君、死にたもうことなかれ。旅順の城は滅ぶとも滅びずとても何事ぞ。君は白地な空き人の家の掟になかりけり。君死にたもうことなかれ。スメラミコとは戦いに王自らは出でまさね。片身に人の血を流し獣の道に死ねよとは、死ぬるを人の誉れとは、大見心の深ければもとより以下でおぼされん。ああ弟よ、戦いに君死にたもうことなかれ。杉西秋を父君に遅れたまえる母君は嘆きの中に痛ましく、我が子を召され家を盛り、安しと聞ける大御代も母の白髪は勝りぬる。のれんの影に伏して泣くあえかに若き新妻を君忘るるや思えるや。とつきもそわで別れたる乙女心を思いみよ。 この世一人の君ならで、ああまた誰を頼むべき。君、死にたもうことなかれ。
Thank you, Shoko. Thank you, Melanie. Now, close to home again, I see Deb Adams there, and she sent a very moving poem by a Vietnam War veteran and a poet, Steve Mason, and she's going to read that now.
Steve Mason is the Vietnam Veterans of America Poet Laureate. This is a poem that he read after the reading of the names of the Vietnam Wall. After the reading of the names, I just call him Johnny, like in Johnny went off to war and Johnny didn't come home. And remember him, like Johnny was a hell of a ball player and Johnny's girl believed in dreams. And I can find him, like in Johnny's folks moved away that year, some say Minnesota. But his name's still here, not 2 miles from his old high school, on a peace memorial, which is a funny name for it. Sometimes, like today, we read all the names. Some just call it the reading of the names. Me, I call it Johnny's song. And as much as I love the words, I've come to really hate the music.
Now, for another poem from abroad, Melanie Cruz will read the translation of a poem by